Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Millie Nichols, and I'm filling in for Andrea Mackenzie as host for today's webinar. So today's webinar is brought to you by Leading Sheep. Leading Sheep is an important partnership between the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, Australian Wool Innovation, and is supported by AgForce. Our aim is to assist Queensland's sheep and wool producers to maximise productivity in both good and hard times. Now, before we start, I'll do a quick round of introductions so you know whose voices are who. As I said, my name is Millie and I work for the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries on the Leading Sheep project, and I'm based in Longreach. Our presenters today are Lou Markey, also from the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, but focusing on regional agribusiness development. And we also have Brad Allen from QRIDA. In the background, we have Greg Barth from the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, who's kindly helping with the delivery of today's webinar. So I'll just switch slides. So I think you might be muted.
Sure, that's better.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for that, Millie, and thank you for being the organiser and working through this process, and thanks to everyone that's joining. And I hope you can get a little bit of info from this process, and don't be afraid to chase us up if you need to find out more information after today. Firstly, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet across the area today. Pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to the Aboriginal Torres Strait Island, the people here today. The Rural Agricultural Development Grants came about as an election promise as part of the Queensland Sheep and Goat Meat Strategy. If you aren't aware of those, it's probably worth having a look at those prior to you developing your applications, because it helps set the background for why the program sits there, as well as giving you a bit of an understanding of, I suppose, some of the overall aims of those strategies. It was for $4 million over 2 rounds. The first round concluded in February, and there were basically 24 full applications received, and 10 of those were recommended for funding. Now, this round that we're going through at the moment is an expressions of interest round. So a number of those that are looked at will be requested to provide a full application, and probably not all of those that have put in expressions of interest in will receive a request for a full application. The second round of the RAD grants was opened on the 23rd of February, and 1.9 million is allocated to the second round. Up to 200,000 is available per successful applicant on a 50-50 basis. So if you're requesting $100,000, then you will need to put up the other $100,000. Likewise, if you're after $200,000, then you would need to find the other $200,000. Just to give you an idea of the types of applications that came through in the first round, both as expressions of interest and as full applications. There were things that were pretty much all the way along the supply chain. So there were people that had put in for on-property development, including handling facilities, fencing yards, genetic improvement, weighing systems to meet market specifications, sheep and goat handling device manufacturing, so that's specific to clearly sheep and goats, feeding systems both in paddock and feedlots, increased slaughter and or chill capacity, and some for training. QRIDA are the administering group for the grant process, and I'll just hand over to Brad Allen to describe the guidelines, and then after that it will come back to me. So over to you, Brad.
Okay, what I'll start off with is just a quick overview of what Queensland Rural and Industry Development Authority does, if you like. Normally Brendan, our Chief Engagement Officer, runs through this, so I won't take long. I'll just run through exactly what Queensland Rural Authority does. So Queensland Rural and Industry Development Authority, QRIDA for short, has been supporting Queensland primary producers for more than 25 years. A lot of the attendees may have dealings with QRIDA through loans and other government grants and assistance and rebates, but we're a statutory authority of the Queensland Government and specialist provider of government financial assistance and advisory support to rural and regional Queensland. Now, we've got a network of 11 regional area managers based all around Queensland. So a lot of the attendees may have had discussions and conversations and loan applications with these area managers, and they can meet on farm to help producers with queries about applications. Now, the regional area managers look after loans, first start loans, succession loans, etc. So they don't have that much to do with the grant schemes. So as I mentioned, we do first start loans, sustainability loans, drought preparedness grants, lots of different areas of expertise through QRIDA, and there's different staff look after each section. So what we're here today for is just to run through the round two. Lou touched on a few points there. The co-contribution grants up to 200,000, and I'll touch on more with when we go through the guidelines in a bit more detail soon. So as Lou mentioned, 1.9 million has been made available to fund the grants under round two of the scheme, and the expressions of interest closed on the 31st of March 2023. So this will be recorded, of course, so you've got the phone number and you've also got my email address if you need to touch base with me over the coming days and or by email. So that's basically what QRIDA does. Now I'll just run through the scheme guidelines. Okay. So the objective of the RAD grant for short, which we'll call it the RAD, the Rural Agricultural Development Grant, is to support economic development in relevant rural areas, and I'll get to where those areas are later in the guidelines. Strengthen primary production involving sheep and goats and support growth within Queensland's sheep and goat meat supply, processing and value chains. Now, as we've alluded to across the couple of slides, it's a competitive-based grant, so applying for it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be successful. We select, well, the committee, which is will select the most competitive applications received up to the cap limit of 1.9 million, which is available under this round. So if, for example, your project is going to cost 500,000, the grant would max at 200 and you need to contribute 300,000. And as Lou said, if your total project costs for 150, it'd be 75,000 each. So any extra questions on that, yeah, please send them through. So there's varying applicants can apply. Medium-sized businesses, predominantly received in round one was primary producers. So primary producers further on is the bulk of your income being produced by your product, or if you're in sheep and goats or dairy or cattle, your main income must be from the primary production. So if it's off-farm income, etc., well, that's there's a query on the bottom here for that. So medium-sized businesses, associations, local councils, universities, but to be eligible also, you need to provide an equal and cash contribution, which we spoke about, and also have adequate experience or qualifications and have reasonable prospects of successfully carrying out the activity clearly, because for co-contribution, we want to make sure that the business carries on. Demonstrate the activity has sound prospects and commercial viability in the long term. So this being an expression of interest is basically giving the panel or the committee an idea of the project and the best projects within the EOIs. If you're actually allowed or invited to do a full application from the expressions of interest, well then of course you need to provide a lot more information, and that's contained within that application pack. But it'll also look at your last 2 years' financials, forward cash flows, etc., to make sure it's the prospects are commercially viable. Also, you have not received funding under the scheme for a substantially similar activity. So if you've been successful in round 1 and you come back for a substantially similar activity in round 2, well then of course you're not going to be eligible. You've not received other government funding for the activity. So if you're looking for a First Start loan, sustainability loan, or a loan through QRIDA or commercial finance, that's fine for your contribution, as long as it's not another grant for government funding. And demonstrate the activity will provide a significant economic benefit to the stated rural area. So that goes without saying, employment and in primary production enhancement values. So the main activities, developing new markets for the product derived from sheep and goats, and expanding the capabilities of your business within the supply chain for production, processing, manufacturing or selling products derived from sheep or goats. And also there is another one, providing specialist training or equipment to an eligible primary production enterprise. So it says they're not limited to, but that just gives you some of the ideas of what the intent of the program. So how can you use them? How can you use what ineligible sources or uses of the funds? Funding an activity which has already commenced or been commenced or completed, I beg your pardon, is not eligible. We'll only be doing new projects. Funding an activity associated with installing or maintaining cluster fences or predator-proof fencing is ineligible. Payments towards debt, purchasing land, feasibility studies, administration costs. So make sure that your project doesn't align with any of the ineligible activities. On our website, a few clients have rung me already, and they've actually gone into the portal, printed it out, so they've got their questions that they need to answer, completed all their responses on Word document, and then cut and paste back into the portal. The portal is, we're moving to a portal so we can be sure that we do receive and acknowledge all applications rather than a PDF that's coming in. Key dates, like Lou said, it opened on the 23rd of February, closes expression of interest, that is, on the 31st of March. So once all of those expressions of interest collated, it goes to the committee and they select which applicants they wish to invite for a full application. That should be and on track for the 1st of May. So then the applicants have a month to complete their full application, and then it goes through the similar process, but in much more detail. And then successful applicants at this stage are looking at the 17th of July for notification. As we go down, I've mentioned in the first part, eligible primary production enterprise means a primary production enterprise that is located in the relevant rural area and involves 50 or more sheep or goats in any combination. Now, when it says a relevant rural area, that's all LGAs in Queensland except Brisbane, Logan, Ipswich and Redlands. And that's mentioned down further. So primary producer also means a sole trader who spends the majority of the trade's labour on, derives the majority of the trader's income from primary production enterprise, as we mentioned earlier. Medium-sized businesses are businesses with less than 250 full-time equivalent employees. So if you've got a seasonal employment, you've got to extrapolate that over 12 months, and I can give more details on that if anyone wishes. And of course, just to summarise those ineligible LGAs, the City of Brisbane, Ipswich, Logan and Redlands. So that's it from me. So Lou, I think you may have a little bit more to cover, and then we'll open it up to questions. Thank you, Millie.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Millie. Brad, you might, yeah, that's good. So just to, because this is now the second round, we've got some learnings that came through from the first round, and the learnings that came through for me was the sorts of things that made a really good, strong application. And it was a good, focused idea. It was well researched. it was specifically for sheep and goats. So things like a shed or a dam, which can't be necessarily specific for sheep and goats, could also be for cattle. Yeah, that tends to make it harder for the panel to vote them as being most suitable. Needs to be shovel ready, and it was easy to interpret the advantage to the industry. That is, this is about a program which is assisting the development of the sheep and goat industries. So that's why it's worthwhile having a look at the strategies. It fitted comfortably within a supply chain, so the panelists could see where it fitted, how it was going to be useful along the supply chain, and where it was particularly starting to fill some gaps in the supply chain. They had ready access to the appropriate skills. They had access to sufficient capital to complete the project, and as Brad said, sort of make a fair amount of confidence that the project was going to continue beyond the project completion date. Had access to sufficient capital, sorry, already mentioned that, provided the financial information requested, and demonstrated long-term commitment to the project. So when you're going through and developing your applications, it's worth making sure that there's that clear explanation, the project, how it will advantage the industry, how it is specific for sheep and goats, how the project is is economically sound for the business. So if what you're putting in is a project which might take 10 or 12 years before it actually returns the value, then that's probably not going to score as well as a business that returns that back to the business in 2 or 3 years. When I said projects are shovel ready, it's make sure that the appropriate licenses are approved or near approval, as work needs to start within 90 days of the signing of the contract. So the date that Brad was talking about for the completion of and the signing of contracts is about mid-July, and within 90 days of the signing of that contract, then works need to have commenced. Education and training projects need to be project specific and be ready to be delivered to meet the time frames. So if they're not, it's a little bit like being shovel ready. They need to be pretty much ready to roll out given the time frames. And projects that require specific skills need to demonstrate where those skills are coming from. So if you're putting in a project that requires a specific type of skill that is hard to find and you haven't figured out where you're going to find that skill, then that's not going to be easy for the panelists to support particularly well. So just that's it from myself. Do you want to add anything more, Brad?
Thanks, Lou. And yeah, not at this stage. I'll be interested to see if there's any other questions from the attendees that we hopefully can answer. If it's outside the scope that I can answer, I'll certainly make note of that, or Lou, you may be able to answer. So yeah, looking forward to any questions that drop in now. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Brad. Well, I'll hand over to Millie for the question side.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Lou and Brad. Yeah, thank you for sharing your practical information and tips for applying for these grants. So that brings us to the end of today's presentations and into our Q&A session. Please feel free to pop any questions that you have into the chat box. I can't see any in there at the moment. But perhaps to kick things off, I might just ask, Brad, under the eligible activities, what does it mean by providing specialised training? Is this similar to workshops or more significant trainings than that?
Yeah, absolutely. And good question, Millie. Thank you very much. I probably should have spent a little bit more time on that particular section. What they'd like to do is, because there's a skill shortage, if you like, in sheep and goats, they've opened it up also to training. So whether that's a mobile training trailer, or it's webinars or training of young primary producers, but remembering it's got to deliver value, and it's got to be a defined value. So I would suggest or encourage those applicants who are doing or providing training to enhance the primary production chain from sheep and goats to actually be very specific in their training. Make sure that their training's already, or the proposed training is already clearly defined, and so they know what their courses are going to be, how they're going to run it, where they're going to run it, and so on. So that's why they have that section in there. So I'm more than happy to take emails or talk through particular projects if and when they eventuate. I don't think, Lou, there were any successful training applicants in the first round, but yeah, it's there as an option.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm just expanding my chat box so I can see there's a question in there. So the question is, we have a sheep business, approximately 700 head, that runs via a partnership. One partner works full-time in the business, the other partner runs another business via a separate trust and receives income from this. Would this situation qualify for the grant to purchase a specialised sheep handling equipment and improve sheep yards? That might be a question for Lou.
I think it might be more of a question for Brad on the eligibility side.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of tricky bits in that space, so I'll hand over to Brad for that one.
Yeah, not a problem at all. And thanks, Millie. Yeah, I was about to answer that. So if you select your primary producer, the bulk of your income must come from that primary production. So I would still encourage that application to be, that EOI to be lodged, because you are in the industry and you've got 700 head. So the application may actually increase the capacities within the existing business, which will then in turn generate more income. So I'd certainly put an expression of interest in, and if without knowing the exact specifics and dollar amounts, I would certainly, like I said, encourage them to put that application in by all means.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question I see in there is, on a smaller property, would you be eligible if you're going to build containment pens to feed sheep and goats? Okay, so to be eligible, you must have a combination of 50 or more of sheep and goats in any combination. If you're looking at, say, holding yards, i.e. feedlots, or very small setup, maybe, or even getting to or emerging into a larger operation, that's eligible, because that's increasing the capacities within the business and also value enhancement. So I'd again encourage that application to come in. We would contact all expressions of interest applicants and actually get a better understanding, because there's not that much room you can put in for the expression of interest portal. We would contact the client and say, okay, give us your, and chat through the project as well, just to make sure we're on the same page. But I'd certainly be putting that in as well. Yep.
Can I just add to that too? Thanks, Millie, and thanks, Brad. Yeah, if you're getting into a feedlot situation, then you'll need to look at the regulatory environment for that. So yeah, you'll need to make sure that you can fit some of those timelines in that that space for this round at least. And also to be looking at where your marketing for those animals is likely to head towards, because that'll help explain, how that fits into that industry perspective as well. Thanks, Millie.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Another question I've just seen pop up in there is, I've lost it. Oh, yes. Why can you not save submissions as you progress? I think that might be a question for Brad, and it might relate to the portal that's been set up.
Yeah, exactly. We have received feedback on that, and unfortunately, our IT department still hasn't fixed it. So, I have had the answer. Quick answer is some clients, like I said, they go in, they print out the portal, and then they fill out all of their information over a week or 2 weeks or whatever how long they take to do it into a Word document, so they've got it. Then they can cut and paste a whole lot in and submit. Doesn't happen to everyone, but I have received feedback that some of them don't save, and unfortunately, that's probably one of the only ways around it.
Okay, sounds good. So
I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah, we can hear that. Yeah, so it sounds like the best way to do it is to copy those questions, pop them into a Word document, type out your answers in the Word document, save that as you go, and then open up the portal again and copy and paste your answers in there when you're ready to submit.
And I know that's not ideal, but that's what some of the clients are doing at the moment, and seems to be working quite well. I know it's not ideal, but that's the best way.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Okay, another question. If you run your business in one entity, but farmland is held in another entity, but under the same ownership, which entity is the application in?
Yeah, another very good one. I'd be doing a joint application, putting both entities in there. Really only need the trading entity, but to make sense for the assessment officers, if you're successful and go to a full application, you'll need to give us those details in any case. So I'd be putting making mention of both applicants. Yep, both entities, I should say.
Great, thank you. There's no other questions sitting in there at the moment, but I have another one. For some QRIDA grants, you have to commence your project within a specific time frame after you receive the funding. Is there any such time frame for this grant?
Yeah, with the successful applicants, we're looking at July. They should commence the project within 90 days of entering into a tri-party agreement, which is the owner, us, and program owner. That's what they call a funding agreement. Not always do they commence within 90 days, but that's what we would like them to commence, because the money needs to get out the door and these projects up and running and completed. So the next question would be, what time frame have they got to complete the entire project? Yes. We'd like it done within 12 months after that, so yes, all up within about 15 months. So that's what we would like, and I'm sure that's what Lou would like. However, some projects may be a little bit longer, but that's the general time frame.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's the cracker of a thunderstorm here, so I do apologize.
So another question, if you obtained money through QRIDA drought funding for another project, are you eligible for something else on the same place?
If it's to do with a different activity, that is fine. If it's not a grant and you're using the grant to form part of your co-contribution, it's not. If it's a commercial finance or a QRIDA loan to make your contribution, that's okay. But the drought grants, etc., I think that's what they call them. It's in a different section to what I do. But if it's a grant, you can't use it. But if it's just a straight funding and it's not part of the project, that's no problem. I'd still encourage you to put it in, and then the committee can make that decision.
Fantastic, thank you. There's no other questions that I can see in there. A huge thank you to Lou and Brad for providing us all with some very useful information. So once again, please complete the feedback form and I will be in touch via emails. But aside from that, thank you for joining us today. And until we connect again, all the best. Thank you, and we'll talk to you later.